Please.
Thank you. Thanks for. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here just before Jeremy Corbyn gets into power and abolish your school. But we have some time until then. Just a bit of a background. Obviously, we already heard some, but in terms of my background, obviously growing up in Iran and coming here, seeing the two different systems, it does kind of help you give you a kind of perspective. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who come to any new country, they don't actually realize that there was a reason that you moved. It's not about forgetting where you come from or your values, but it's also about embracing the new place, the values of the place that gave you a fresh start. As a YouTuber, obviously it's a non-job job, so don't do it. Do an actual, get a real job. But if it happens, there's always a backup plan. In terms of how I got involved in politics, I think, again, growing up in Iran, in countries like Russia or Iran, where on the surface everything seems okay. It's not like North Korea or Venezuela where people are actually going to get killed every day, but you kind of know that there's a bit of a pressure, an oppression, the state is kind of involving your life. So when you wake up, you have to be involved. You have to watch the news all the time, be aware of current affairs and everything. So automatically, even as a kid, I was interested. And I think I kind of, when I came here, from a relatively middle class background in Iran, went to Lewisham, lived in a council estate, went to a Church of England comprehensive. That's also something you should never do. And it wasn't great. And growing up in southeast London, which was kind of still much better than what we had in Iran, everyone complained. It's the worst country ever. Everyone's dying apparently. And I said, what's going on? Everything's fine. And so when I went to college, when I went to university, I realized there needs to be a bit of change in terms of the mentality of people here in the West. We kind of forget who we're supposed to be. And I think I knew my political leanings before I knew which party I should belong to or should join. So I was interested in reading all the theories, all the books, following a lot of kind of economic big names like Hayek and Mises and Friedman, Ayn Rand. So I kind of knew which way I'm leaning economically and politically before I realized the Conservative Party is the closest to my ideology. Now, the whole point of it is conservatism. So I don't know if anyone in this room would openly identify themselves as conservative. Hands up if anyone. I would have been surprised if anyone did. So it's the biggest thing about conservatism is it's not technically an ideology. In the same way that it's not the same as socialism. We all know what socialism is, obviously, on the surface, and it's not really what they teach you usually. With all due respect, I don't know what you're teaching them, but especially at university level. University level is a big problem where people focus on the intention of ideologies rather than the actual outcome. So that's the whole point of socialism, where it focuses a lot on there are good intentions for the sake of being equal, for the sake of fairness, justice, blah blah blah. We want to have all these measures, but they don't really care about the outcome. Whereas conservatism is not an ideology in that sense of the word. Conservatism is basically understanding where you come from, embracing your history and values, in order to be able to shape the future. The other thing that's kind of changed, at least in this country and in America, is that the left and right kind of switched over the last couple of centuries. It was the left when the left used to be liberal, not anymore. It was the liberal wing which was pro-free trade, progress, freedom of speech, individual freedom, small government. It was the right that was, obviously, because of the links to the religion and everything else, religious hate speech, you couldn't say a lot of things, protectionism for the sake of blockchain of the votes that they had, farmers and industries. So they weren't really pro-free trade, and not even fully free market, obviously, because they, even conservatives at the time, still had things nationalized or the state was running things. So it was, again, just like as I said earlier, they were forced to change to survive. And that's the only way the Tory party survives. They change over time. And so back in the 70s, the Tory party was never supposed to be the party of Brexit. They actually embraced the whole European Union at the time, or the community. But now, Brexit's happening, they have to, this is all going to the party, whether it's right or wrong. For the sake of the party, the next few decades, they have to embrace and become the party of Brexit. Because it's going to happen, and the majority of people are accepting it. If they don't, they'll be destroyed. So they embraced what's right at the time. It was church, union, Ireland, protectionism, anti-free trade. Then it's changed since Robert Peel, who basically changed the Tory party to the Conservative party. He was also the guy who created the Metropolitan Police Force, and he was liberal-leaning Conservative. He was close to Gladstone, the Liberal Prime Minister, who defected from Tories because the Tories were, at the time, backwards and protectionist. And so that's the kind of current situation now. Until the 70s, the Tories were still the party of nationalisation. Macmillan was pro-nationalisation, big government. And when Margaret Thatcher changed it and moved it back toward new liberalism or classical liberalism, people like Macmillan, former prime ministers, were not really happy. They were kicking up, saying she's selling out the assets of the state, and that was the whole problem with at the time. But moving on from the whole Tory party stuff, ideologically, in terms of the current right, is about free market and economics. And I think the issue with economics is, that's why you realise soon when the majority of without actual stats, a lot of the economics and people who study economics become more left-wing. And the ones that actually understand economics are usually quiet. So that's also because usually intellectuals go towards the left, because there's a link between leftism, which is again going back to compassion, because they want to find a solution to the problems we have, gets closer to academics because they spend a lot of time reading theories and thinking, well, I've read it, that's what we should do, without realizing that it might not work on a practical level because people are different. That's why we always say on the right of economics, whereas whether it's Hayek or more radical version, Mises. Obviously, in terms of the right of economics, you have two sides: the Austrian school and Chicago school. The Austrian school that kind of was linked to Mises was completely almost libertarian, no state control, essentially, because they knew that there's a knowledge problem. Not one person or a small group of people could fix all the problems, or any problem actually. Hayek and Milton Friedman from the Chicago school were slightly closer to the state could help in some aspects. There is a role for the government to be involved in some stuff. And I'm personally more closer to Austria and Mises, but I also understand practically I can't tomorrow, for example, abolish everything that's nationalised or get the government out, because, for example, the NHS, you can't get rid of it tomorrow, people will die. They don't know how to react to it. So there is that kind of practicality that you don't really usually see from the left, because when the left are ideologically believing in something, they don't really change it, whereas at least some of us on the right know that even we believe in these radical economics kind of policies, but we're not going to actually implement it tomorrow because it doesn't work. There's a lot of criticisms we get on the economic right, which is economic liberalism as opposed to economic socialism, is the fear of greed, and people won't really care about anyone else, and what about the left behind? What about monopolies? Monopolies is the biggest one that people always bring up, whereas in reality, every single example of a monopoly historically always existed when you had state intervention. When you have a government involved in any sector or industry, you have a monopoly. It's never happened where, if there's a fully free market in an industry, where you create a monopoly. Look at banks, look at oil, look at everything else we have. Transport, obviously the trains, as much as what Labour can't tell you, it is still nationalised. Our railways are nationalised. Trains themselves are privatised, and that's why it's mixed, and it's a big problem, so we have to fix that. But the same thing as markets also goes to trade, protectionism versus free trade. A lot of people on the left, but also on the right, conservatives with a small c, the traditionalists, don't like free trade because they think, well, what about the local farmers? What about English jobs for English workers and everything else? Whereas they don't realize that you create a complacency and laziness in industry if you do that. Human beings, historically, we've survived, we've evolved because of, you might say hardship, but we had to go through ups and downs. We have to feel that fear to survive. Not saying in that way everyone should suffer, but in a way that, if you know that you have to work harder, or you have to protect your industry or business, as opposed to, oh, if it fails, I could ask the government to bail me out, like banks or Thomas Cook tried to do that. Well, you've got to really try to find a new solution. Whereas if you have a free market, obviously the market will fix it in a way that the bad companies will go down. Monopolies never stay up because there's always a platform for smaller companies to come and compete with it. So that's been proven historically, and but it's difficult to sell it because people always get emotional and say, but what if it doesn't work? And whereas every example we've had, the establishment of America at the time, not right now, but right now in Singapore, Hong Kong, and a lot of other places, it's worked. Even here, after the Industrial Revolution, it works. Obviously, it goes through kind of a lot of issues, but the system, capitalism as an economic model, does work. And it is worrying that there's only technically one party in this country that embraces it. Rather than, the whole point of the Liberal Democrats were supposed to be like the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party was fine. We had differences, but it was fine because they still believed in the same values economically. But now it's just one party that believes in free market economics. And that's why a lot of people can't really support the Tory Party because there are other issues with the Tory Party. It is getting better, it's getting modernized, it's becoming more socially liberal, but a lot of people historically said, okay, I get the capitalism part, but are they against gay marriage, or are they against kind of human rights and that sort of stuff? So that's slowly changing, so hopefully we'll see how that goes. But economics also affects education and certain industries. So again, I'm a radical when it comes to education and schools. I believe, again, I go with the case studies. Everything I believe in, I try to see the case studies and what's working, what hasn't. I believe the best way that education could work is if you get the government completely out of it in a way that every school should be independent. But obviously, if someone can't afford it, you have school vouchers from the government. The government could pay if you can't afford it. But the more you have independent schools, obviously, the more competition, the cheaper the rates will get, and the more opportunities and the more competition actually does help. The reason private schools or private healthcare are expensive in this country is because there are monopolies. Comprehensives and the NHS. That's the only reason that you have expensive places. But if you create more opportunities for people to start smaller independent schools, bigger ones, in every area, if you have like 3 or 4 or 5, then they're not going to charge like millions of pounds. I mean, probably don't charge millions of pounds, but that's kind of the economics. So if you ignore that part, on the right, there is an issue right now which Brexit is now being embraced by the right, whereas back in the 70s and in the 80s, it was the left that were in favour of the European Union. That also goes back to what I said about the left and right are switching and have been switching for a long time. I don't believe what the media are saying about Brexit or what even a lot of people who are in charge of both sides, because Brexit is not what we're hearing right now. They made it to kind of sound interesting and exciting, so they talk about all the weird kind of reasons that people support or hate it. The whole point of Brexit is about who would you rather do your paperwork and make your laws? This building or this building? That's the whole point. A building in Brussels or a building in London. That's literally the whole point of Brexit. Everything else inside, obviously it's getting like everyone's staring at things, but that's the details of it. And obviously people talk about it, but the real concept of Brexit is simply about admin, and it's a very boring topic. And obviously when it comes to democracy and campaigns and elections, referendum, politicians and campaigners have to talk about these sort of things so that ordinary people actually understand or kind of get involved, become interested in to vote. If the referendum was actually about this paperwork, Brussels or here, no one would care. Like, what is this? This is some sort of like House of Lords type of debate. And that's why it became quite toxic. Apart from now Brexit and economics, there's a cultural side to conservatism as well. So there's that's why when I meet someone, I never ask, are you a conservative or socialist in that way? Because it's difficult to answer. I always put in 3 different categories: socially, economically, and culturally. So economically, we talked about that free market socialism. Socially, you've got social liberalism, and as a whole, this country and the West, well, generally this country, not the rest of Europe, all parties and most people are socially liberal. Even the ones that are socially conservative, believe in kind of family values and that sort of stuff, they are still okay with liberalism in terms of people's rights and everything. So socially, in this country, we don't really have a debate, which is much better than America. And then the third is culture. And cultural conservatism is simply about believing in the system, the establishment, not in that way. Constitutional monarchy, for example. Believing that it For this country, it works. Believing in family values, the things that kind of part of the culture, believing in British values, which these days some people can't actually describe, apparently. But it's everything that this country stands for. Obviously, the values of democracy, the values of being skeptical towards authority and the powerful, always hold them to account, the values of individual liberty rather than collectivism. These sort of things are cultural conservatism compared to the other side, culturally, would be Marxism, technically. I know it's like a word that everyone throws around, but it is about kind of the radical view that cultures shouldn't exist. The cultures that in the West currently exist shouldn't exist for the sake of a collectivist, worldwide values, sort of like a Star Trek world where everyone's the same. It's a great idea, and I love the whole Star Trek idea, but it doesn't work tomorrow. You can't instantly make the whole world no borders, no flags. People will go crazy. It's fine to be inspirational and aim for it slowly. I mean, ideally, you want the whole world to be equal, obviously, but in terms of equal opportunity, but you can't do it tomorrow. You can't like bring down your borders in one country and expect everyone to be exactly the same. It doesn't work. Everything goes back to the political spectrum and the whole point of conservatism. A lot of times we can't really talk about left or right anymore because you can't put people in one box. You can't just be one, like right wing or left wing, because as we said, there are three categories at least. But I have my own political spectrum. Instead of having like up, down, left, right, weird 3D sort of thing. It's just one line. Make it simple. Statism, freedom. Government control or individual liberty, and everything in between should belong to the same points. And if everyone could be more consistent, we would have a much better world. It is complicated because, as I said, some people could be socially liberal but economically socialist. But I believe if you believe in freedom and you don't believe in state power or big government, for example, for cannabis or gay rights, you should also believe that economically. If you believe that you shouldn't have legalized cannabis, for example, then technically you should also believe in socialism, in state control. Because if the state is controlling your social life, if you believe that, you should also control your economic life for the sake of a good cause to help everyone. That's the whole point of collectivism. But as a whole, there's a spectrum. Power to the people or power to the state? Big government or freedom? It's difficult. You have to sit down. It might take a couple of days to actually think every single area which side I am, but it might make it easier. I don't want to keep going on too long, so I might just make it easier to do kind of live Q&As if you want to ask any questions or anything you want to.
Yes, so I'd like to say thank you very much indeed for talking to us. And if I might start with a question myself, is Britain going to leave the European Union?
Yep, 31st October, do or die, come what may, he's coming home.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. If you want to follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, you could find the details here. And make sure you check out our merchandise site and get your own Brexit t-shirts and everything else. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification button next to it so you get notified when I release a new video.